He wasn't trying to Hellenize the Jews, he was trying to totally eliminate all traces of Jewish culture. Hanukkah is not one of the appointed festivals that we find in the Bible. It's a tradition that came much later, but the reason we're discussing it this morning is one word, and that word is Jesus. It was important to him. It actually played a major role in his ministry. One of his greatest statements he made, or most profound statements that he made, was actually during Hanukkah. And we'll cover that here in a little bit, but I just wanted to give you a roadmap of where we're going today with this. We'll talk about what is Hanukkah. We're not going to do that the whole time. This is not a boring history lesson for the next however many minutes. We'll give a quick overview of it. And then what does Hanukkah have to do with Jesus? In other words, should Christians care about this day? What's the significance? And then how do we as believers apply Hanukkah, or can we even apply it to not just a couple days out of the year, but to our daily lives? So that's where we're going. And spoiler alert, I'm going to conclude with we can apply it, but that application is not going to be a call or the application of, hey, we need to go and celebrate this. That's a decision you make on your own. That's not where we're going. It's going to be much deeper than that in terms of the Great Commission in our lives. So let's jump right into it. What is Hanukkah? And I think the easiest way to start out what is Hanukkah is what Hanukkah is not. And if you're like me, you grew up, you thought it was one. I didn't know what Hanukkah was. I just assumed that it was Jewish Christmas, but it is not Jewish Christmas. All right. That's not what Hanukkah is. And props to whoever made this online. I stole it offline, but that is not what Hanukkah is. Hanukkah was around before Christmas, about 170 years before Christ came to earth is when when they started to celebrate it. But if you were to go to a modern day Hanukkah party or celebration, you would see a lot of this on this slide right here. There is some great Jewish a cappella boy band groups out there doing parody songs. For all of you Taylor Swift fans, they do some of those too. There's tacky sweaters, there's gifts. At the bottom right there, you can see the dreidel. That's just a game they play where you win chocolate coins to eat. Who doesn't love chocolate? And then in the middle, front and center, fried food, all about the donuts and the fried potatoes. So that's what you would see. Those are the elements of a modern day Hanukkah celebration. What were the donuts? You told me you were bringing them. Ugh. See Jeremy afterward for your free donut. But those are the elements of Hanukkah, what you would see if you were to go. But what Hanukkah really is it's an 8-day feast of dedication, or a festival of lights, as it's commonly known, celebrating the reconsecration of the temple in Jerusalem. Why did the temple need to be reconsecrated or rededicated? It was because of this guy right here, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He was the king of the Hellenistic Syrian or the Greek kingdom, and he reigned from 175 to 164 BCE. And then what's highlighted in green right here is really the main point we're taking away from today. He was best known for his encouragement of Greek culture and institutions. So he really sought to unify his empire through common religion, which was the Greek religion of the time, and also common culture. So this meant for the Jewish people that he was going to take away all of their identity, no worship of Yahweh, of the God of Israel. And so his attempts to suppress Judaism brought on the War of the Maccabees, which ultimately concluded with where the celebration of Hanukkah comes from. But I thought this was a really good summary statement of what he was actually trying to do. He wasn't trying to Hellenize the Jews. He was trying to totally eliminate all traces of Jewish culture. The way that he went about doing this was he took the righteous high priest in Jerusalem at the time. He replaced that high priest with that person's brother, who was open to the Hellenization Greek culture coming in. And then eventually he replaced that guy with another person that said, I'll bring in more money from the temple for your kingdom. So you can imagine how pleased the Israelites or the Jewish people were with this. And then while Antiochus was off on one of his war campaigns, rumors spread across Jerusalem that Antiochus is dead, so we're going to take back the temple. We're going to go to war with him. And he actually wasn't dead, so you can imagine how happy he was when he found that out. So he committed a lot of atrocities in Israel, killed a lot of people, a lot of Jewish people. But one of the things that he did leading up to this to unify the culture, unify through culture and common religion, was, and this is from the book of Maccabees, which is extra biblical literature, but it's good historical information. Antiochus wrote to the whole kingdom that all people should be one people. And for the Jewish people in particular, this meant for them that they were no longer allowed to keep Sabbath or feast days. They were no longer allowed to circumcise their young males. There was no Torah that was allowed, no teachings of God. So really these big identities of who they were and also of their faith, in worship to God. And this wasn't just a slap you on the wrist if you get caught doing these things. All of these things, if you were caught doing any of these things, they were all punishable by death. And there are horrific stories. I won't give examples, but there are terrible stories of people who were put to death for doing these things listed here. Furthermore, when Antiochus did hear about the uprising in Jerusalem of the Jewish people trying to take back the temple, he came into Jerusalem and he desecrated the temple. He raided the temple, and he did some pretty awful things. To start off with, he stole the treasures within the temple. After he had stolen the treasures in the temple, he set up an altar to Zeus in the temple, and he sacrificed a pig on the altar. And we've talked about it before here, but the temple is that one place. It's the image of Eden. We lost Eden. We lost paradise with God. The temple was where God's presence dwelt. So it was where heaven touched earth. It was the Eden that we had here on earth. So when he comes in and desecrates the temple, it's not just a random structure. It is the dwelling place of the God of Israel. And so he sets up an altar to Zeus inside the temple of Yahweh, inside the temple, and then sacrifices a pig. If you're familiar with Jewish culture, the pig was probably the most unclean animal. I mean, when they do archaeological digs in Israel, they determine if there were Israelites living in the area by whether or not there were pigs and other unclean animals found in the remains. So they just completely stayed away from pigs at all cost. And so Antiochus knew this, so he sacrificed a pig inside that temple. And then arguably this is the worst of them all. The temple was filled with debauchery and reveling by the Gentiles who dallied with harlots and had intercourse with women in the sacred precincts of the temple. So this is a bad day. This is a very bad day for people who are loyal to Yahweh, whether they're Jews, Gentiles that had come into the faith, whatever it may be. The only modern equivalent I can really give you for this would be, and I hate even using this as an example, but this would be in the early 1940s, somewhat the equivalent if the Nazis were to have won World War II and Hitler were to have come over to America and took over the White House and set up members of the Nazi Party as president and congressmen and women, that kind of thing, and having a Nazi celebration ceremony in the dwelling place of the president in the White House. And so that's what we can think of it as kind of an equivalent to what this was to the Jewish people, although it's even greater to them because it's still the God that we serve. So it's one up from that. But all of this led to the Maccabean Revolt. There was a priest in a town who wasn't having any of this. So long story short, he and his 5 sons decided they were going to rebel against this. And one of his sons was named Judah Maccabee, and he became the leader of this army, the Maccabean army, essentially. And after 3 separate campaigns and numerous battles, the Maccabees eventually, by a miracle, I mean a miracle, won this war. And another analogy, this is nothing against Tennessee High. I love Tennessee High. My wife graduated from there, but this would be like Tennessee High's football team beating the Green Bay Packers. Right? That's really what this would be. Or if the Packers aren't good this year, just pick a team that's good. So that's what this would be like. And so Hanukkah commemorates the Maccabean victory over Antiochus and the rededication of the temple that followed shortly after, which we'll get into in more detail here in a little bit. But one of the aspects of Hanukkah is the miracle of light. And this is more of a traditional tale of why Hanukkah is an 8-day celebration. But according to the Talmud, which is one of Judaism's sacred texts, that when the Greeks left and the Maccabees came in, they found 1 jar of oil with the high priest, the righteous high priest with his mark on it. 1 jar was enough to last 1 day, burning the light in the temple. And so, as tradition has it, the miracle was that this 1 jar lasted for 8 days. Because to make oil for the light in the temple, it was actually about a week-long process to do. So there was enough oil, this 1 jar lasted 8 days, as tradition states, to keep it lit until more oil could be made. So that's one of the traditions of it. That's also why you will see If you're familiar with the menorah, you will see a different menorah at Hanukkah. This one on the left here is called a Hanukkah. You can see it has 9 candle branches on it, as opposed to the 7 on the right, which the one on the right is the one that's in the temple. And so there's a teaching, the short version of it is that each one of us, and I'll say this before this, the way that you light the menorah traditionally, or the Hanukkah at Hanukkah, is you light the center candle first, and then you light every other candle with that center candle. And you light one more candle for each night. So that by the end, this would be night 8 of Hanukkah. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 8. But you use the center candle each night to light all the candles. So the application there in the teaching is that we all have the ability to be this shamash, or this servant, where we actually spread our light to other people as a servant to them. And where have we heard that before? Jesus.